Hi everyone and welcome to this week's Crime and Punishment story. This week I am covering the strange story of Thomas and Catherine Booth in North Shields in 1863. This is slightly different to the normal stories, but I hope that you will still enjoy it. But before we begin, can I just say, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you are new here or haven't already done so, then please do consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. Thank you. Thomas Booth was born in Ireland in around 1812. He had previously been married to a lady by the name of Elizabeth Rudd, and they had two children together, a boy named James and a girl named Jane. Thomas had been in the army and had been stationed in Portsmouth, and this was where James and Jane had been born. It is not clear what had happened to his first wife, as I was unable to find any details of her after 1851, but by around 1856 Thomas had married a lady by the name of Catherine, and they had moved to a place called Scott's Yard in Church Street in North Shields. Only one of Thomas's children seems to be living with them, and that is the older child, James. Catherine was born in around 1832, also in Ireland, and she is roughly 20 years younger than Thomas at the time. There is very little information about her earlier life, but it is known that her mother lived in the North Shields area too, and that they had lived in this area for around 20 years. One main thing that is known about Catherine is that she is a heavy drinker, and it seems that she often attempts to persuade Thomas to drink as well, even though she is fully aware of the fact that he cannot handle his drink, and after just a couple he will not know what he is doing and can become quite abusive. Thomas had left the army by 1863 and was receiving his army pension on a quarterly basis, but he was also working as a shoemaker. It is said that he worked in Church Street, so it is possible that he had a workshop in the home the family were living in. It was not uncommon at the time for people to run a business from their homes. In around August of 1863, Catherine had left Thomas and gone to live with her mother. It was said that she had left him due to his ill usage of her, even though this would have most likely been caused by her persuading him to drink. Her mother lived in Charlotte Street in North Shields, which was very close to the family home that Catherine had shared with Thomas in Church Street. It seems that Thomas at this point in time had made no effort to persuade her to come home. On October the 2nd, 1863, Thomas received his quarterly pension payment, and it was at this point that he decided to try and get Catherine to move back into the family home. It's not completely clear how he managed to do this, but she did indeed return home, and the couple then went on a drinking spree, which by the time the crime was committed had lasted for about a week. So it could be assumed that the promise of drink was what swayed Catherine to return. On Thursday, October the 8th, Catherine went to the police station to report Thomas for having hit her with a poker during one of their many arguments, and that he had also tried to wound her with a knife. The policeman on duty at the time told her to apply to the police courts the next day to have her husband arrested. However, she did not do this, and instead she returned home to Thomas, where they carried on drinking and arguing. On Saturday morning, October the 10th, Thomas went to a local public house where he bought some whiskey to take home. Shortly after his return, a much bigger argument began between the couple, and people in the street outside could hear the shouting and yelling, where it was said that Catherine could be heard shouting "murder" several times. The majority of the neighbours were too afraid to go into the house, but a lady by the name of Elizabeth Garfit, who was described as being the local water seller, went to the house. She didn't knock, she just opened the door and went inside. There she found Catherine in a pool of blood, and Thomas with a shoemaker's knife in his hand, attempting to attack her again. Elizabeth, after shouting at Thomas, bravely took hold of his arm and held him until his wife was able to escape to a neighbour's house. On letting Thomas go, Elizabeth spoke to him, saying, "It's the drink that has done this." At this point, Thomas put his head in his hands and threw himself down onto the bed. Elizabeth left him there and went out in search of Catherine, and it seems that a very short time after this Thomas ran outside and hid in an area known as Graham's Yard, which was also in Church Street, and this is where the police found him a short time later. The police had been informed of the crime, and Sergeant Adams had set off from the police station to look for Thomas, but before this, P.C. Simmons, who was already in the area and had been told of the crime, had already found him hiding in Graham's Yard and had arrested him. When he was told why he was being arrested, Thomas simply said, "Well, I will go with you." On arriving at the police station, he was charged with the attempted murder of his wife, and to this he made no reply. The police had also searched the home of Thomas and Catherine, where they had found a sharp shoemaker's knife. It was suggested that this knife had recently been washed, but still had some threads of clothing attached to it, and it was thought to have been the weapon used to attack Catherine. Catherine had gone into Mr. Hardy's house, and on arriving she almost instantly fainted, and when he saw the blood and wounds, Mr. Hardy immediately sent for the doctor. Dr. Emerson had soon arrived, and on examining Catherine he found 2 large wounds in her stomach and a cut to her face. At the time, Dr. Emerson feared she would not survive, and for quite some time afterwards she was seriously ill, but she had slowly made some slight recovery and was sent to live with her mother in Charlotte Street. Some short time later, Thomas was for the first time brought before the magistrates at North Shields Police Courts. It was stated that Catherine was too ill to attend. Elizabeth Garford spoke of what she had seen in the house on the day of the crime, and Thomas was afterwards able to question her. He asked if he had appeared to be in a drunken state, to which Elizabeth said she could not be sure, and he also asked her about the character of his wife, and Elizabeth stated that she felt that Catherine was of a bad character, and that she had often seen her in a drunken and disorderly condition. Not much else was discussed at this point, and Thomas was remanded for another week and taken to the House of Correction in Tynemouth, where he would remain until next brought up before the magistrates. On appearing before the magistrates the following week, it was again stated that Catherine was still too ill to attend court, so Thomas, 2 of the magistrates, and the Superintendent Hewitt went to the home of Catherine's mother in Charlotte Street, where Catherine was able to make a statement. She stated that on the morning in question they had been drinking and had argued to some extent, and that she had then attempted to leave the house, but Thomas had locked the door, so she was not able to do so. She claimed that he had suddenly stabbed her in the stomach with the knife that he used for shoemaking. She then said that she struggled with Thomas in an attempt to get away from him and to be able to unlock the door, and during this struggle her jaw was cut with the knife. She was finally able to unlock the door, but she then fell to the floor, and when Elizabeth Garford entered the house, Thomas was on top of her, and Elizabeth had to pull him away from her, and she was then able to escape to Mr. Hardy's house. She also mentioned the attack with the poker that had happened on the 8th of October. However, she said that this had been her own fault, as she had aggravated Thomas and that they had both been very drunk at the time. She also stated that they had been drinking and arguing all week, but that until the poker incidents, Thomas had never attacked her with a weapon before. After this, Thomas was again remanded for 1 week. This process seemed to go on for several months. Each week, Thomas would be remanded for another week, as Catherine was still too ill to attend court. However, in May of 1864, it was finally decided to commit Thomas for trial at the next assizes. The trial eventually took place in July of 1864, and this time Catherine was able to attend the court. The prosecution continued with the story that Thomas had just suddenly attacked Catherine with the shoemaker's knife, and that she had struggled to escape him and had only been saved by the efforts of Elizabeth Garford. They suggested it was an unprovoked attack, and that Thomas was a very violent man, and that he had been clearly trying to cut her throat when Mrs. Garford had found them in the house that morning. However, when Catherine was cross-examined by the defence, her story changed from her original statement. She now admitted that she was addicted to drink and that she made Thomas drink as it meant she could drink more if he was drinking with her. She said he had tried to stop her drinking and that one time she did stop for a short while, but she was unable to stop for long and was soon drinking heavily again. She admitted that on the morning of the crime, Thomas had locked the door to stop her going out for more drink, as he had refused to go for more and she wanted to go herself. And this had caused the argument that led to them both struggling with each other and falling to the floor. Although she did not say who picked up the knife first, she did say that Thomas had it in his hand when they fell to the floor. She stated that her wounds were caused in the fall when she fell on the knife, and that her face had also been cut during the fight while she had been trying to unlock the door. This was the only small part of her original statement that remained the same. She did not suggest that Thomas was completely blameless, but her new statement certainly made it clear that she felt it had been an accident. Whether this was the truth or whether she felt the need to protect her husband is something that only she would have known for certain. The defence stated to the jury that this was clearly not a case of Thomas intending to murder his wife. It was an argument and a fight that had clearly gone horribly wrong. It was said that if Thomas had wished to kill Catherine, he could have done so easily while the door had still been locked, and that the prosecution's suggestion that he had tried to cut her throat had been proved untrue, as Dr. Emerson had clearly stated that there was not so much as a scratch on her neck. He felt that the jury could do no more than to find Thomas guilty of unlawfully wounding. The jury took only a few minutes to return a verdict of unlawfully wounding, and the judge then sentenced Thomas to 12 months imprisonment, which may have been slightly longer had he not already spent 9 months in prison awaiting his trial. Unfortunately, I was not able to find out what happened to the couple after the trial in 1864. It would be interesting to know if they separated or if they got back together again when Thomas came out of prison. I would truly love to know what happened to them next. So if anyone out there listening has any further information about Thomas or Catherine Booth, I would really love to hear it. This story clearly seems to be a case where once again the so-called demon drink has caused tragic circumstances for another man and wife. Luckily, on this occasion, neither Thomas nor Catherine lost their lives, but both would have been affected by it for the rest of their lives. I hope that you have found this tragic and sad story interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.